Right. HBRIC. Now, the other comment I should have made this morning is it would make more sense to have the information update first as a segue into the decision items at the end. So I have had that request from Dr. Pearce. Welcome, guys. Who else we got here? Sam. And perhaps if that does suit, we could perhaps go to item 14 first, which is the update, and then go to the decision items. Is that how you see it?
That's helpful, thanks, Chairman, because some of the background is to the decisions really is in the update, and we'll probably wind up going over things twice if we do it in the order you've got in your agenda. So I think overall that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We've got a good muster here, and good morning, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning. I think it's still morning, councillors. So you've just heard from the Port with their latest update. Obviously, we're very pleased with their performance as well. At our annual general meeting, we reported on their results to their half year because our financial years are out of sync. So you've now got the latest information about their financial and other performance. We're very comfortable with their, if you like, business as usual capital expenditure, the $100-odd million that Garth showed you in the slide there, because that's matched pretty closely by their depreciation. We've had a comprehensive discussion with them about the development plans and the capital expenditure for that, and we have a clear understanding with them about how all of that's going to progress. If that whole $130 million were to be spent, it's about 50% of the current enterprise value of the business, so it's a rather substantial chunk of investment, and we'll continue to have a close engagement with them about that. And we're reasonably closely engaged with them as part of that on the expansion of the off-port storage, both at Pandora and at Whakatū. So if I turn to our update on the RWSS, the bulk of this obviously is about where are we at in terms of water uptake, progress on that. We'll cover a little bit about the judicial review and the other conditions precedent. And I have colleagues here, and I think Duncan, a couple of the team down the back, if there are detailed questions to be answered, and later on in one of the decision papers.
I'm sure there will be. Maybe we get them up the front now. And
yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Guys, bring a chair up.
Why don't we do that?
We can find a chair.
So while they're doing that, I'll just set the scene a little bit. The board set a date of the 11th of November, as the paper says, at which time, or immediately after that, we would make a decision as to whether or not we had enough interest in water uptake to continue progressing on the other work streams for the other conditions precedent. You have a table in front of you that shows that on the 12th of November after that, we had 40.5 million cubic metres in the 3 to 6 total and 28.1 million cubic metres, and then an update when we wrote this report, in signed up. An update on those numbers at the 19th of the 11th, and I'll give you the numbers now as of this morning. So in completed signed up contracts, we have 29.7 million cubic metres, so that's up a little from where we were 5 days ago. We have 9.1 million cubic metres at stage 5, just waiting for the counterparty to sign. So in aggregate, those two add up to 38.8, the next row down. In stages 3 and 4, we have another 3.3 million cubic metres. So stages 3 to 6 combined is 42.2 million cubic metres. And still in the pipeline outside that in stages 1 and 2, we have 11.4 million cubic metres. So we were pretty confident on the 12th that we were going to reach the 40 million, not today, not next week, because this condition precedent, as we have consistently said, will be the last condition precedent to be met. But we're very confident that we will reach this condition precedent in time for financial close. And we have continuing and steady progress over the period of the last few weeks. Those numbers in that table are just the numbers from existing local land users, and it includes, in stage 5, the contract that is yet to be confirmed with Central Hawke's Bay District Council, because that is still subject to consultation. It's not in stage 6. But there are additional volumes of water that we believe we're going to be able to sell before financial close. We're in discussion with several parties about underwriting water. In other words, they will buy some water beforehand, before financial close, and then as further contracts progress after financial close, that will eat away at the volume that they have bought. They have some residual risk, obviously, that if they're not all sold, they're stuck with the contract, if you like. And there are a number of parties from outside of the region who are not current landholders who are expressing interest in significant volumes of water as well. So from both of those categories, we think there are a good number of millions of cubic metres in addition to that from local users, on top of the numbers that are in this table. So I'll stop at this point on uptake and see whether there are questions about this, which I'm probably mostly going to defer to Andrew and Duncan to answer, and Sam as well.
So you've just been talking reasonably consistently about 40 million as the target. I'd understood the target was actually 45 million or thereabouts. Can you clarify?
As has been said probably on about 4 or 5 occasions, the target, the actual target is a proxy for a cash flow, and where that target actually ultimately ends up as a combination of what we call new water and deep water. That's a bit of an anachronism, as you're aware, and that number moves around slightly. It's actually based on the deep water contracts, it's less than 45 at this point in time, but that'll continue to move a wee bit. So it'll become a final check around financial close on the cash flow. Yep.
But whether the number's 42 or 43, or 45 or 40, we're still confident of getting to any of those numbers.
Yep.
Now, the 40 is actually what you've determined in your resolution last June, that's all.
If I could just add to that. So based on the mix of deep water and new water that we're actually talking to farmers with at the moment, the 42.2 million cubes that's at stage 3 or above, that balance would give us the equivalent of a 40 million cube fully priced position. So, but as I sit here today, they're not all signed. But I guess I think we've got enough contracts in the market that if we were 100% successful, and it's very hard to be 100% successful, but if everyone signed the water that's out there at the moment, we would meet the equivalent of the 40 million cubes of fully priced water.
Councillor Belford.
Yes, on page 48, the middle of the page, paragraph that begins further, could you explain this reference to underwriting by commercial partners or commercial parties a little more clearly?
Yeah, that's fine. So in effect, an underwrite is where a party takes a contract for a period of time, effectively takes the foundation water user contract terms and conditions and underwrites. So in other words, that is water that's underwritten where the cash flow is then built into the financing model, and that party can then sell down that water through the uptake curve, through the construction period.
So if I won the lotto, basically I could knock on your door and buy some of this?
Well, I don't think we'd sell it to the average putter. So it's where there's a party with if I can be direct, you're out of luck probably, Tom.
But
Unless you're a bit wealthier than I thought you are.
We'd want to assess your creditworthiness in a number of other aspects, yes, to satisfy ourselves.
No, so the party has to have a, look, this particular proposition fits with a party who doesn't necessarily have a direct interest in the water, i.e. is not going to be an irrigator, but has a direct interest in the scheme going. So it could be, but equally it's targeted at a corporate entity with a significant enough balance sheet to underwrite it.
So would it be fair to say that that ultimately is the safety net of this project, that if there is a shortfall in real users of the water, you can find any number of placeholder investors to hang on to the water you need to generate the cash flow you're required to generate?
Well, I think that an underwrite has an insurance component to it, and I'll use those words, but equally it has a real value, and any party underwriting this needs to see the value. So the value in the water. So they're taking a particular position on it. But it has insurance value. Yeah.
I think the other piece of the reason why we're doing this is that, as I said, we think we're going to get there to the target with the local water users. Now, the water user agreement, as it's currently set up, if 60 million cubic metres of water are sold pre-financial close, then inflation on the water price doesn't start until water is delivered, whereas otherwise it starts from financial close. It's certainly in the water user's interest if we could reach that number. And if we used a significant chunk of underwriting to help us get to that 60 million number, because I believe we'll get across the line without it, then that would be very good for users.
Do you want to make a comment?
Councillor Barker.
A couple of questions. On the underwriting, how long is the underwrite for? Is it for the 35 years, or is it for 5 years, or is it 2 years?
10 years.
10 years,
Yep.
Thank you. On the Central Hawke's Bay Council's bid for the water, what do you understand the process to be for them to go through consultation to be able to make a confirmed offer to you? Process and time, yeah.
So the process is a special consultative process, just exactly as this council runs from time to time. That involves them putting out a proposal, submissions on the proposal, and a hearing of that proposal. Typically, it's a 5-week process, and ultimately then the council makes a decision based on that process. So, it's pretty standard stuff, really. They have to put out a proposal, and I guess I'm expecting that they will do that early in the new year.
And you expect
Yep.
And on that assumption, you're expecting the CHB Council to make a decision when, approximately?
I would expect them to make a decision well ahead of what we think we'll get to in financial close. So it could be February.
February. Thank
Yep.
you. On the CHB water take, should the Central Hawke's Bay Council decide not to proceed, are you still optimistic that you will get the commitments to get to financial close with 42, 45, 40, whatever it is?
Yes.
Councillor.
No, it's certainly of value to us. It's a well-developed. We've obviously negotiated a well-developed position with them, and it's well advanced. So I wouldn't underestimate its value, but are we absolutely reliant on that transaction to get to financial close? The answer is no. Yep.
Councillor
Thanks,
Bevan.
Chair. So if we look at the number of, or the volume under confirmed contract over the past several months, it's set at 20 million or thereabouts for, 3 months, I think, or something like that. And then it got to 24 when you reported to us a month ago, and now it's jumped to not that far short of 30. So that's the biggest increase that you've had in the last 6 months or longer, maybe in the life of this project, in fact. And I'm wondering, is the difference here because there was a deadline of the 11th of November, which you described in various quarters as a critical decision point in this process that actually has prompted a wave of sign-ups, or am I misreading that?
So let Sam have...
Oh, well, it certainly helped that having that deadline. But I think you just got to look at behaviour of farmers, Peter, Councillor Bevan, which you'd understand, or agricultural people. They're naturally conservative, they're naturally reticent, they're always busy, they'll always work on a deadline basis. And so having that deadline helped, but also there's a getting around to it and understanding the ramifications. So I think it's a combination of that, but I think credit, if I can, to the team that have been doing the work out in the paddock. It's been damn hard, tracking these farmers down, getting them excited, getting them to understand that this scheme is real, it's going to go, but it does require water sales to get it underway. And so the uptake curve of these schemes always has been of exponential shape, which is what you described, that rapid uptake. The other rules about these schemes are that sorry, I'm changing the subject now slightly, but they're always damned expensive when you put them in. And when you put them in, you say, why didn't we do it 10 years ago? And the other rule is, of course, there's a lot of land sales around the inception of an irrigation scheme, a lot of changed land use and changed operators. So this is just another rule which has been borne out, is that the uptake is slow, but towards the end it really cascades. And I think that the minute we get to financial close and the diggers start moving and putting in pipes up roads, people will say, gee whiz, I wished I'd done that, and they'll be signing up for the more expensive water. They'll miss the early bird discount, so to speak. So I just think the overriding comment I'd make is that this is not, we're relieved we've got the sales, but it wasn't unexpected it was going to come late. And finally, just reiterating again the admiration for the team that have been out there doing the sales.
Team?
I guess I was just going to agree with Councillor Bevan that the deadlines, having a date's been helpful because, naturally we sort of all defer a decision if we can. So it brought it to a head for some people. I mean, that's meant that some people have decided not to participate in the scheme at this stage. I mean, everyone hasn't sort of fallen into the yes bucket by any means, but quite a few have, which is obviously helpful. I mean, last time I was in front of this council was 2 months ago, I think, and it was 20 million cubes then. So it's quite a movement over that period.
So that being the case, why wouldn't we set a final deadline for financial close in order to prompt the behaviours that you're agreeing will get us over the line on this?
Well, from a sales perspective, if I could just answer a little bit selfishly there, I think it's, I'm not sure how helpful it is to have a final deadline unless we've shown we can sort of satisfy perhaps another of our CPs, which is essentially to put an investor in front of these farmers. So I think, really in most business models, you don't sort of find your customer base first. You sort of, I guess, find your investors and then go to your customer base. So I'm just happy that the farmers that have decided to support the scheme have been happy to sort of show the level of support they have, given we've still got a little bit of refinement to do.
We may yet set a later deadline, but I agree with what Duncan has said. Until we have some other pieces of the puzzle in place, there isn't a lot of point in setting another deadline for this. As I've said, and we keep saying, this is the last of the conditions precedent that will be met because of the way it's worded. But if we get to a position where we've got substantially more than the 45 million cubic metres, and we want to drive to see if we can get to the 60 million before financial close, then we might well set another deadline. But that's tactics a bit further down the road yet.
Microphone, Councillor Dick, use your microphone. There's quite a crowd watching outside who can't hear, as they keep telling me.
I was just commenting or asking the question that you really wouldn't want to do that until you've removed the last element of uncertainty, being the judicial review.
Absolutely.
Which must still be influencing people. It certainly would influence me if I was a water buyer.
It's bound to be influencing some people, and yes, we need to have the decks reasonably clear before you do a final drop dead date.
Councillor Belford.
A moment ago, you discounted the cash flow value of the 42 million because of the deep water business. What would the discounting of this be related to the actual deliverability of water? You have whatever amount is contracted, there will be presumably some number less than 100% that you can deliver the water to. So what would that percentage, how's that shaping up, and what would be the cash flow implications of not having that income?
Better answer that if I can. So at the moment, the design that we have that we're running with includes delivering to all of the parties that are stage 3 and above. So we're including them in that, if you like, first element of distribution.
So is 100% coverage then?
Thus far, yes. Yep.
Councillor Graham. The 38 million sold, what percentage is dairying? Is it on the original? Sorry?
You'd probably best to answer it, but not that high, actually.
The estimate was 30%. It's nowhere near that.
Oh, to be honest, Councillor Graham, I haven't looked at that specifically for a little while, but what I can say is of that, there's no dairy conversions in there. So far we've only got existing dairy properties that are either unirrigated taking some water or that have irrigation taking some extra water because they don't have enough. So that's no huge supply, I'm told, because that's been the case for a little while now. And when I tested that with the likes of Andy McFarlane, he wasn't surprised because he thought if new conversions were going to come, they would tend to be on the back of some sort of land ownership change. So far, the highest form of land use that's reflected in stage 3 and above is a mixed cropping and red meat, sort of a combination of farm system.
Long ago, based on the McFarlane work originally, that drove all the economic calculations as to the full economic benefit of taking this project on. And so now the types of land use, what exactly will be done with the land that is would be under irrigation has changed quite substantially since those early days. So are you all planning to give us some recalculation of what actually you expect to happen on the land that will be irrigated and what its value will be?
So obviously, and we did do this in public, not last meeting, but the meeting before from recollection, we gave you a demonstrated forecasting model. So that forecasting model forecasts land use based on commodity prices, prevailing land use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are various uptake curves, but I think the base case uptake curve had dairy, for example, sitting at about 25% as opposed to 37%. And simply all that means is that the water consumption is slightly different. It's probably a slightly broader footprint. But the point being made by effectively Graham and Duncan in relation to the construction contract and where the water flows is that we're building a distribution network to serve that serve a land use that doesn't necessarily have dairy at that level. So the underlying point is that the financials are the financials work, whether it's a 37% dairy or it's 25% dairy.
That's
not really what I'm questioning.
Yeah.
I guess there's been a case made to the public that there is X% GNP increase, 2,500 jobs, et cetera. We're not creating a lot of jobs by selling water to Central Hawke's Bay for drinking. We're not creating a lot of jobs by banking water by commercial underwriters. And we have changed the complexion of the land use that is anticipated. So its value in terms of what will actually be produced off of this investment must clearly have changed since 3 years ago or whenever, when those kind of macroeconomic numbers were served up. Will those numbers be
So this is a great opportunity to turn to something that I was going to suggest that Council do. So one of your requirements is that you have Deloitte review and update the review that it undertook with you before about the business case and the financial model in order to inform your subsequent decision. So I would suggest, and I was going to suggest in any case, that that you commence that work. The financial model component, which is the project finance, if you like, can't be done until we have a specific investor involved, but the reassessment, if any, is required, and whether or not there's any change to the regional GDP, because I wouldn't necessarily leap to a conclusion that there's any different impact from a slightly different mix of land uses. It's probably a very good time for council to commence that piece of work with Deloitte or whoever you're going to have do it.
So you're saying that right now? Now's the time to start?
Now is the time
Yeah,
for you
okay.
to start, so that that work is done during December and January, so that you have it in your hand, because with any luck, by January we will be in a position where we've confirmed an investor, and then the financial model work can be done as well.
Okay. Can I?
A comment to Councillor Belford. I think it's in the public arena, perhaps, but in the public arena there's going to be a $100 million new investment in Central Hawke's Bay in the land use that was not contemplated in the model 3 years ago. So I don't know how we account for that.
Can I just ask, and you may think my tongue is firmly in my cheek as I ask this, but I have met this person, and do not disclose their name, but how old's the oldest to sign up for water? For a 35-year contract?
80.
I'm not sure you're entitled to ask that question under the human rights legislation, but nonetheless.
Unconfirmed rumour, it's the Mayor of Worrell, but... Okay, other questions, sorry. A bit frivolous there. Councillor Graham.
I'm also interested in economic benefits. So you're suggesting, I'll just go back a peg. We just had the Port Boys, and as you, and probably some of you stayed, they're talking about 20 to 30,000 increased containers out of Hiratonga. And I asked the question at Rio Tinto, and they said 15. Is that still a figure that you're thinking of, that you go through the port?
Sorry, Rex, that was a, sorry, Councillor Graham.
Call me Rex.
I mean, that question could be asked in any economic assessment of the type that the chairman talked about.
But that's not something you guys do. You want us to do that separately. You haven't looked at that.
Well, there's sorry.
So this question was addressed in the economic evaluations before, and my recollection of the answer that Garth gave to your question, which was a kind of 5% increase in containers going through the port, is broadly consistent with what was in the business case at the beginning of 2014. Sorry. So again, as part of your the work that you commissioned Deloitte to undertake, and it's one of your resolutions that you wanted to do this for yourselves, and it's entirely appropriate that you should do, then that's part of that economic assessment, I would have thought.
Right, any further questions on uptake? Let's move along.
Shall we move along? So the judicial review is, as this paper says, Justice Collins has been appointed to manage the case. There's a teleconference set up for the 8th of December, at which I guess some decisions will be made about setting a date and how long the process will take. But, you know, the matter is in front of the courts, and we're working closely with Crown Law, because we and DOC are first and second respondents. As the paper says, we are pretty confident, based on our advice and discussions with Crown Law, that the process that DOC has followed is robust and defensible. And very interestingly, the action that's in front of the court is entirely about process and does not address at all the question, the substantive question which had to be answered by DOC in order to decide to make an exchange of land as to whether or not there's a net gain for conservation, and DOC have clearly concluded that there is. That I think their report says the exchange more than comfortably passes that test, and that's not being challenged. So we will see what happens in terms of a date setting and how long that process takes.
Oh, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And just to get some clarity around that position, around not challenging the value, is that because there was no process by which they could not challenge that, or because actually there is no evidence there?
No, they're perfectly entitled to challenge the substance of the decision as well as the process and the technicalities, and they chose not to challenge the substance.
Which, if I may add, since I talk to Forest and Bird occasionally, should not be interpreted as them having drawn a conclusion, as stated here, that conservation values are enhanced by the exchange. They clearly do not believe that, and that underlies, of course, the action they're taking. The fact that they've taken a procedural avenue to test the proposition.
We'll let them
is
talk for
different.
themselves, Councillor Belfin. Let's keep...
I'm not willing to discuss the merits or otherwise of the case in public while it's in front of the court.
Let's continue.
Just a little observation. I just want to thank you for the report. Crown Law are notoriously conservative on all of these things, and if they are confident, well, that's another thing. The only misgiving I have is that when people can't win arguments about substance, they revert to process. And I go back to the case of the Wellington Airport on consultation, where Wellington Airport and Wellington City were absolutely confident that they'd gone through the consultation process, only to be turned over completely by the High Court. So just a note of caution there.
I think our advice is that the case, that the decision is robust, but it's not certain, and nothing's certain in the law. We have items separately on the design and construction contracts, as I said, and on the budget, so we might turn to those separately, Chairman. On financing investors, we made substantial progress, and we may be in a position to bring you something before the end of the year for a preferred investor. It will either be late this year or very early in the new year.
Thank you.
Through your chair, there's a substantive meeting going on in Wellington today with one of the potential investors and Crown Irrigation. So that's good news, and Crown Irrigation have already had the same discussion with the other two. So it's quite nice that there's some competition out there in the investor stakes.
Okay, Councillor Belfin.
Are you able to say anything in this forum about the other investment vehicle that you've been exploring? Andrew, my view is that we still haven't had their approval that we can advise their name.
Oh, sorry, but I think that was around
Okay. So let's get into the figures.
Other than let's turn to the financials. I suggest other than the question of the budget, which we will deal later, if there are questions around the expenditure to date, that Heath or Andrew answer any questions that there are.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm interested in how progress is with the landowner negotiations. Are we all on top of that, Graham? Any issues?
Got a moment, sign, Graham. A moment in the sun. Landowner process are progressing well. We had equally an indicative date of 11th of November to progress those, if not fully, certainly to a well-developed conditional contract phase. We see no issues with the contract arrangements outstanding that we're not going to get there in the timeframes that we see in front of us, be it
completed this year or early into the new year. So it's going well.
Okay, any other questions on anything remaining there? Page 50, 51. No further questions? Someone happy to move then that we accept this report? We have a mover. Thank you, Councillor Dick. We have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Further discussion? I'll put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Let's adjourn for half an hour for lunch. What? He can wait. Mr. Newman. Back here at 1 o'clock.